Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next The Reckoning of Roku chapter analysis video. This one's going to be for chapter 45, which is called A Spirit of All Nations. Once again, YouTube channel membership is enabled if you want to help support the channel, and subscribing also helps. But obviously important title there. This has been a big part of Roku's character development, and so we're finally going to get to see that kind of happen here in this chapter. It's Ulo fighting Roku, of course, but Roku is now going on the offensive. And that's exactly what we get to see when we start the chapter. It's Roku tried to throw a simple jab of flame. A cannon blast of white fire erupted from his fist for several seconds, overshooting Ulo and scorching a hole through the wall. He then has to block ice projectiles coming his way, and so he puts up a wall of fire, and the wall of fire goes straight to the roof of the cavern, and we know how big the cavern is, so it speaks to, again, this idea Roku doesn't have control of, he can't control the extent to which his bending is going to be. If he lets loose an offensive attack, he doesn't know what the extent of it is going to be. Interestingly, we get this other description here. When Roku tried to bend his flames into daggers, they crackled in his hands like bolts of lightning that seared his palms so painfully he had to let them dissipate. So there's even certain bending attacks that he could normally do, but are now threatening to sort of almost like turn into more advanced kind of techniques on their own. And because he doesn't know what he's doing, he almost can't do anything with it. So he has to almost keep it to the basics of just letting out a lot of fire or something like that. It's very, very interesting. But anyway, then he tries to do some fire flying here. So he has blazing jets from his feet, of course. But this goes out of control because while he's in a large area to fly around in, he's got so much power like beneath his feet, he's threatening to go into the ceiling, and that's what he does. He smashes into the ceiling here. It describes that like the two jets at his feet combine into like a column of fire, and he like fire spouts basically his way up into the ceiling, smashes it, and then he's falling from like the top of the cavern to the ground. And this is this big moment where he doesn't know how to block this because he can't control his fire flying, and if he tries to like offensively firebend, he'll probably destroy everything below him. So the idea here is the only way to save himself from dying from the fall here is to use airbending. And so he thinks to himself, what he's done in this fight so far is start out defensively as an airbender, and then he switched completely to offensively as a firebender, but he needs to do kind of both together here, and this means he needs to actually airbend. And so what he tries to do is he basically, as he's falling, he tries to do the circling kind of whirlwind motions to get the kind of cushion of air beneath him, and it eventually begins to work. He finally does it. A whirling cushion of air gently set him on his feet. And he reflects on the idea of, oh, like, I must have already done airbending before. As in, remember, how did he end up in the caves in the first place? He fell basically from like the top of the island, basically to the bottom of the island. So how did he survive such a fall? He must have used airbending back then without realizing it. And then he's been basically doing airbending dodging because he knows the martial arts of airbending throughout this fight. But obviously, to a certain degree, he's been subtly using it. And in a way, the power boost, because he's in a way so bad at airbending, kind of forced its way through as, usage of this dodging kind of in a way. But now he's finally accessed the ability to actually do a little bit of airbending here. So that is a significant thing. And Ulo notes, that fall should have ended you, but Roku's able to stand up and in his mind, finally, in a way, like confidently for the first time say, I am the Avatar. And so this is where Ulo goes full power. Because there's now more cracks in the ceiling of the cave, Ulo basically uses all these cracks to pull more water through. It streamed down like hundreds of sudden waterfalls, as if Ulo meant to fill the cavern like a basin by draining every stream and river and lake on the island, every drop of moisture from the air and clouds and forest above. And so Roku now has to figure out what does he do to counter this. He's been able to deal with an Ulo who's been mainly just using minimal moisture in the air to do pretty powerful attacks. But now he's threatening to bring a mass amount of water into the battle. This is going to turn things in Ulo's favor. What does he do to block this, basically? So while he's bringing it all in, channeling it from the outside, Roku goes full power airbending here, and he took the deepest breath he'd ever taken in his life, filled his lungs, held, focused, and exhaled with all his energy. And he just sends Ulo flying from the top of the hill. And he hits the wall. He's unconscious, and he's going to be out of action for a while now. So this is what Roku's been planning to do this whole time through. Hopefully incapacitate Ulo so he can talk to young Gib just before the equinox comes to an end. So he manages to do that here with this airbending attack, of course, kind of knocking him out against the wall, ultimately. So airbending has actually come in very clutch in this fight in terms of dodging effectively, and then it being the right technique to knock Ulo out, basically. So he then gets on top of the hill himself, right in the center of where the light is during the equinox, and he's focusing. It says here, he focused, emptied, released, reached. And so the idea here is that this is him sort of going into the spirit world. They seem to frame it more here as it's less he full on transfers over or even crosses over into the spirit world fully, and more that like he gets a kind of look almost into the spirit world, because I guess the equinox is where the two kind of cross over a little bit more. He gets to look in a way from a distance in to see what's actually happening on the other side. And so what we get here is the truth of young Gib, which is that there is no spirit called young Gib. What's actually happening here is that there are two spirits fighting on the other side, basically on the equivalent space that the sacred cave is in the spirit world. There are two spirits fighting each other, and it's just like pure spirit energy clashing against each other. It's to the point where like there's so much energy on this side that Roku can't even really make out like what the spirits necessarily are. It's just pure kind of primal energy kind of clashing against each other. And this is what's causing this event to happen, that because of the equinox, to a certain degree, it must be drawing these two spirits together. And then because the veil between worlds is as close as possible during the equinox, some of this energy kind of seeps through into the cave itself. And this is kind of what charges the cave. And so obviously the idea is that this just by itself confirms that so much of what Ulo has talked about is lies, manufactured storytelling about the history of this clan. Was there a requirement at all to actually do a ritual? I tend to take from this that is the case, that it seems like, based on this description, that it is purely an automatic thing, that the equinox happens, the veil passes over, and because of where the spirits are in the spirit world, their energy just charges the cave. Because there's so much energy coming through, it imbues the entire environment, the air, the ground, everything, with spirit energy. And that's why the cave is such a powerful power source overall. Because again, I don't think they say any specific at any point in the book to explain that Ulo actually does anything to lock the energy in there, ultimately. I think it's just so much energy comes through that it takes a long time to burn through, basically. So this is where Roku realizes that, oh no, what does this mean? I can't convince these kind of, impossible to understand spirits who just kind of exist to fight each other. I can't convince them to stop. Like, there's no having a conversation with them, basically. There is no young Gib to talk to. So what's he going to do? It says here, he may as well play Paisho against the tide, meaning Roku had no clue what to do next. So an interesting kind of cliffhanger here on this side of the story, as Roku has succeeded in so many ways. Like, he's kind of won his fight, getting rid of, like, knocking out Ulo. He's made a spiritual connection here, but only to get the understanding that the spiritual, there's no negotiating with the spirit to make anything happen, like, at all. So what is the solution? And then keep in mind what's happening on the other side of the story. Malaya and Sozin are on their way. They don't, like, Sozin especially doesn't know the full scope of the power here at play. So they're walking into potentially a bit of a messy situation, and we're wondering what's going to happen next. When is Ulo going to wake up again? And, you know, is the equinox going to end, like, immediately? Is it going to last a little bit longer? You know, there's a few questions that you have here. But once again, I love Randy Rabai's description of what it is like to be an inexperienced bender trying to harness the power of this. And even that, I say that Roku is a master firebender, but he's still struggling with just the amount of power to use enhanced bending attacks. It takes skill and effort. And I think that's particularly notable here. So I love the description of the fight. Roku then, you know, switching to realizing he needs to fully awaken himself as the Avatar, become an Airbender too, and that's the key to kind of winning this fight. He finally does become sort of a spirit of all nations, by finally, you know, moving away from just being the Firebender, and that's really cool. They do describe that he tries to sort of counter what Ulo starts with the waterbending by trying to waterbend himself, but it says here, but he found he couldn't access his waterbending yet, even with the help of young Gibb's energy. So not quite there yet on that side of things. There is still a bit of a kind of emotional block surrounding what happened with Yasu, I think, still there when it comes to waterbending, but otherwise good progress from Roku. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on this chapter. What are your thoughts on the big reveal? Personally, it's a little bit disappointing to me that they change it from being one spirit to two, and then they tell you kind of very little about those two spirits. I would have liked Roku to maybe get something from the spirits other than just like it's a primal clash of energy and there's no way to kind of get through to them whatsoever. Like there's no talking at all whatsoever. I think I would have preferred it where like we just got some sort of reveal of like, oh, it's these two spirits and they exist in the spirit world to do this thing. They had no clue that they were making any impact on the physical world, and Roku has to kind of go from there, realizing he can't change what's going on in the spirit world here, but he has to do something still. So it's just that detail thing of going from potentially getting the chance to meet this super interesting cave spirit, young Gib, to there's two spirits, but we're probably never going to learn anything about them in particular. That's a bit frustrating, but otherwise I actually like the reveal overall. But let me know your thoughts on that below. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.